I'm gonna go, Dennis. All right. Go ahead and get this meeting of the Board of Education started at 7:06. You will all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all. Dr. Willett, acknowledgements.
Right, so we do have some artwork this month that was provided by the students for high school, and I'm just going to acknowledge their contributions. I also think I have some copies of the artwork here. As you know, the Public Library now does the evening for the parents to come in and check out the kids' artwork. Teachers different kids every month. And so for this month, we have Sky Perdomo, Avery Wank, Mackenzie Snow, Crystalia Constantine, Whitney Singer, Lacey Booton, and Piper Booton as the kids who contributed the artwork. And this is their artwork that was displayed at the library. I'm trying to get it. Wow. Pretty cool stuff. Pretty amazing. And then there's so thank you to them for that. Obviously, they're very talented, much more talented than myself. I can't get this thing to stop jumping around. Sorry, it's making everyone nauseous. You see their amazing capabilities. So wonderful. Thank you to them for helping adorn the library. And thank you for helping make everything a little bit more beautiful. That's our acknowledgement for today. Next week we have valedictorian, auditorium, the gymnastics team, and track team for acknowledgements.
All right, appreciate it. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to add a budget. You know, we're gonna have a deeper dive next week. I'd just like to see if maybe we can spend just a few minutes just discussing the budget as a whole and materials that might be supplied. What just have a maybe open discussion for a short period of time if possible. So we're not trying to jam everything into next week, but I'd like to one main focus would be like the bus contract.
Want to discuss the bus contract today?
Yeah, is that possible?
Are you prepared to talk about the bus contract?
Well, it depends on what aspect. Then I can talk about it in general.
Okay.
So,
The deep dives, I need to know specifically what we're looking for, you know.
and to your point, Brian, I think you said it, the intention next week, we can go with that.
Yes.
Pretty much the entire meeting next week is dedicated to that, the conversation on the budget.
Yes.
Necessary reductions. I think, Dr. Willett, you have presentation with the council.
On the
on the
24th.
24th.
Yeah.
There it is.
And then the 26th, I can come back with anything you want.
Result of that. So, but as far as adding just a high level
Yes.
budget discussion, specifically bus contract type things, that this one, do we have a second?
Sure, second.
Okay, discussion.
Just to clarify, what does this conversation look like? If we're going to be discussing the whole thing next week, what are we accomplishing this week?
I just wanted to touch base on I just wanted to touch base on an idea I had regarding the bus contract and routes and what's possibly feasible if on a top level of the middle school and high school routes. You want to wait till next week? You can wait till next week.
But there's
Try
no,
not to have an 8-hour meeting next week.
well,
respectfully, that's, I'm more so curious, typically when items are added to the agenda, I'm more so looking for, the specific of what is being discussed. That's more so what it was. I'm not saying let's not discuss it. It was a curiosity question. Thank you for answering.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, so 1, 2, 7, so additions to or additions to the agenda require 2/3 vote.
okay.
So we've got 7 of us here. Any further discussion? Rini,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Katie,
Nay.
Jaden,
Aye.
Dana,
No. She's not on.
okay, I missed that. That's not.
Well, it's for a second, you're right. It looks like she
Okay.
bounced.
And then I'm an I. So we got to go with it. Let us add high level discussion, specifically bus contract ideas as item. All three. Thank you, sir. Any other additions to the agenda? All right. Approval of the minutes. Entertain a motion to approve the February 26, 2025 minutes.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Right. Hearing none. Rini,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Jaden.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Public participation. Members of the Tolland Board of Education welcome the members of the public to share their thoughts and ideas at this time. When appropriate to do so, members of the board and the administration may respond to comments during points of information. However, in consideration for those in attendance and in an effort to proceed in a timely manner, follow-up discussions may need to take place outside of the meeting. If you would like to speak online, raise your Zoom hand in the room, raise your hand and be recognized. As always, please start with your name and address for the minutes. Rebecca Risley.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Rebecca Risley, 103 Mountain Spring Road. If you can hear music in the background, my apologies. My son is practicing guitar, so you may hear a little background noise, and I didn't have time to put my own earbuds in. So hopefully it's not too loud or distracting. First of all, thank you for all of your hard work. I know that this budget has been challenging, as it always is. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, that I certainly appreciate everything that you're all doing, the countless hours that you put in, and the ability to work together, as well as to publicly support the budget that you approved and voted for to put forward. That said, I want to get off of the budget conversation, and I want to acknowledge the high school play that happened last weekend. If you didn't have a chance to see it, it was just mind blowing. We have some unbelievably talented kids in town, as well as just the staff and the parent volunteers and other volunteers and the crew. And the lights and the sound. And it was just, I think I've been going to productions for over 10 years now. And every year, you think it can't get better, and it does. And it's just amazing. And the fact that they do it all on only fundraising and donations, it is just really unbelievable to me. And I just wanted to acknowledge all of the hard work that they put in and the wonderful performance. So thank you very much for letting me say that. And I hope that many of you were able to attend because it was really wonderful. Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you. Any others that would like to speak? Again, if you are online, raise your Zoom hand in the room. Raise your hand to be recognized. All right. Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Correspondence.
We had 4 emails come in the last couple of weeks. 3 of them were on the lockdown with some concerns with that. And one of them just today was on or yesterday was on the budget specifically to the SRO positions. For the 4 months.
Why does it say there's 13? Was that last time? On the agenda, it says there's 13. Budget related.
You're on the wrong agenda.
Ah, okay, then that would be it. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. March 19th.
All right. Points of information.
I think there was
Good.
I think there was an updated one because last meeting was canceled maybe, and then this was the special meeting they called this.
Well, we've got it on the screen.
Yeah.
Good points of information. Would anybody from the board like to speak?
Yes, I would.
Rini?
We had an FFC meeting before this and I did ask, talk to Dr. Willett about the timing of information that we would get around the budget and ask that we could potentially get it a little earlier than maybe 24 hours in advance. So I just want to throw that out there that was a request that I made, not to say that the whole board, didn't ask him to do that. So it's just hard to go through everything and be prepared with, thoughts around it and digest it all. 24 hours, I mean, let's just say I'm sleeping for 12 or, not available. So, I would personally like to have it before that. So I did ask Dr. Willett. I understand it might be under the board purview to say, what the timing is, but I asked for that.
Anybody else that would like to speak?
Yeah, I would agree with what Rainey was saying. I actually attended the FFC as well. And yeah, I think if we can have a couple days or even the Friday before, like we've been going through since the last 6 months of meeting agendas and documentation, the more time we can have thoughts, ideas, and questions might arise. Just have to get a better thought process and game plan. Considering such a large budget amount, we're trying to have to adjust.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, my assumption, Dr. Willett, if I'm speaking incorrectly, please let me know. Is that while you'll be absolutely making adjustments and looking for things up to the last minute, anything that you can get out previously and put on the dashboard, we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, the more direction I have, the more I can tailor it to what's desired. I can get information out Monday. But yeah, won't be able to get it for anything. I can't get stuff out by Friday without knowing. Well, so if I have no idea exactly what you're looking for, it's difficult. One of the things we've done in the past is created a document that allowed you to say from this percentage to this percentage here, we want to do these 3 things and this, take these items and put them in, and these programs for this staff, put them in, and then it adjusts accordingly kind of on the fly. If you want me to create scenarios, I can, or options. But I just need to kind of know. And so, what I assumed we were doing is I assumed we were going to take and create sort of the board's since we weren't necessarily doing scenarios, I was going to have a series of things that had values, and then we were going to ask the board what their priorities were, and then build it around what the board's priorities were on the fly. to take the 734 down to the 2.99. So there wasn't gonna be a preset, thing unless you want me to create presets. And if you do, I can, but I won't have them by Friday.
I don't think. We can talk more about that when we get to L3.
I was just gonna add to that, if you're gonna have like a smorgasbord of items that we can, an à la carte that we can pick and choose based on what we feel is important. Can that à la carte come to us sooner than later? Is that a possibility, that à la carte coming to us?
With numbers attached.
It's
Sure.
just a
Yes,
long, it's a
absolutely.
long list.
Yeah.
I can do just about anything you want, but Monday would be the day. I can't.
Let's discuss.
Right now, we're Wednesday and,
Yeah, so, and I
Let's
think
discuss.
Monday is better than Tuesday or Wednesday.
Let's discuss starting.
and I'm just being realistic. It's about what I don't want to say. I can just.
Okay. Anybody else for points of information? Committee and liaison reports. Curriculum,
We haven't made that this one.
communication.
Yeah, we met last month. Jen and Dana, myself, Walt came up with an idea regarding the budget in general, that a lot of times we seem to, or some members of the community seem to state facts online that aren't necessarily true. I'm not gonna have a debate back and forth online, or Walt or any one of us regarding data points and arguing back and forth, so. I discussed with Walt, we all did in the committee decided that if we can have about a 30-minute window, have, residents come if they like to ask Walt or the board, really Walt, the data. This is an opinion, we're gonna save that for public participation. But if they have a data-based question, you have about 30 seconds to ask the question and about another 2.5 to 3 minutes for Walt to discuss. If it's a higher level, needs more data, we'll write it down, we'll get back to you. Try to do that for 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how much participation people would like. Just hoping that would bring people who have questions or whatnot to the open forum of discussion. But I don't want it to be, it's not a opinion based whatsoever. That's for public participation. This is for only data question, budget questions.
Perfect. And just to,
And I believe, set that for next week's agenda.
yep, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It is on next week's agenda. I think it's a fabulous idea, and I applaud the committee for taking on the conversation about how do we get accurate information to the people that really want to know. So, big thank you.
Yes.
Good job. Okay. Policy.
Hey, Tony, it's Dana. I'm trying to switch devices. I'm cutting it in and out, I think.
I can hear you.
Okay. I'll have an update on policy next week. We did have an agenda planning, with Dr. Willett this morning.
Okay. And then FFC, Dan's not here. Will one of you at the meeting could give us an update?
I don't sit on it, I was just a public participant.
Yeah, we reviewed the financials and, talked about a couple of other things, but, I don't have the number right in front of me, but we're 1.22 right now, I think it was. With a few things that may come back into the fold. Just, that are encumbered, but might not need to be spent, so still looking pretty good towards the end of the year.
Great. All right. And then negotiations. Jen's done. All right. Thank you all. Chairperson's report. Nothing with the exception of, I want to just kind of chime in on what Rebecca was saying earlier, in that I did have the opportunity to go to the high school play and was absolutely blown away. such an amazing job by our kids, by the staff, by the volunteers. It was my daughter's first theater experience, first musical, first play. I was worried as to how, you know, an 8-year-old would be able to sit still. And about 20 minutes in, I look and she's on the edge of her chair with her mouth just open and just the entire time and asked me when the next one they were going to do was. So, you know, our students, our staff, you know, the entire team that put that together did such a wonderful job of creating the magic that is theater. So I offer my appreciation and my thanks to everyone involved and look forward to the next one that we put on in the district. All right. A short, sweet, moving on. Dr. Willett, Superintendent's Report, item K1, monthly financial report.
All right, so, you know, again, I'll try to just do a flyover of the fairly big stuff. We did do this in FFC, so try to be as concise as I can. The report for this is 1 page, so it's a little bit different. Code 130 is over by about 40,000. This is custodial subs. We talked about that it was just a tough year. The custodians are very sick. We need a lot of subs. We're going to be merging the lines 130, 139 for this report in the future. So just as a heads up for that. So stipends over by about 50. And we talked about this in the past. We have 2 special education. Sorry.
I was showing you sharing, you're not showing that.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Just in my notes here. Back over here. Just prepping for one of the questions today. All right, so. Right, so going back to these stipends of special education, there were things that covered there. Those are also the transportation, 5 transportation clubs that we talked about. So this is the same things as you've seen before. Health, life, disability over by 61. This is going to continue to change as vacancies, retirements, things like that. Professional ed services, 320 in this document. 275 this month, 161 last. It's going to continue to change as special ed needs change. Contracted services. Also in this line, it rolls up and it covers the psychology vacancy, which we talked about in FFC. FFC is a much longer report. And so this is a 1-pager that condenses these things. So it has special ed in it and the psychologist position. So we're paying an outside service for that for BGP because we are not yet able to find a person for the position, although we do have some hope there is a 0.5 coming and they may go up to a 1.0, which would be really great. So we're trying to get that covered, but it's not happening in a right way. And so we're using this contracted service. Special ed, student transportation is over by 13. A special ed transport and athletic transport has gone up. And so that's what's happening there. And maybe I'll just kind of stop there and see if anybody has any questions. Those are some of the bigger ones.
I apologize. What was the last one that you mentioned? The last-
Transport services. It's,
Oh, 510.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It's 13 over. It's basically special ed and athletic transport. In FFC, we talked about how we had undershot the athletics transport. So that goes.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
And this particular report is a 1-pager, so it rolls a lot of the things together that we talk about in FFC. Some lines are combined. So I guess I'll stop there. FFC, yeah, covered this in more detail.
Any comments, questions? Thank you, Dr. Willett. New business item L1, solar considerations.
All right, we have Adam Teff with us. Mr. Stava also will join us, but his daughter is actually in the athletic sports, so I think he'll be in and out. But Mr. Teff is here, and as you might have already heard, Mr. Teff did a presentation before us for the FFC, and so we were very thankful for that. His FFC moved him up to the Board of Education to do a presentation for the Board of Education tonight. So, so Adam, can you hear me?
I can.
Adam, I'm gonna throw up this presentation here, and then I can move it if you want, or I can share the screen to you, whichever you'd be more comfortable with. If I'm sharing screen, I'm assuming you have the presentation at home.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to enable screen sharing for me, and then I can just toggle through it that way. We can kind of move seamlessly through it.
You should have it, and I just, jumped out, so you should be able.
Okay, yep, I got it. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dr. Willa, for inviting me in tonight, and sorry I couldn't make it in person. My son had a parent-teacher conference after school hours tonight, so kind of gummed things up a bit, but I'm not sure who may have been on the board a couple of years ago when we first presented these projects, but I'll just give everybody a little bit of backstory on who I am and you know, the process that's unfolded over a few years now. So I'm Adam Teff. I manage Titan Gen. We're the CCM, so the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities partner for renewable energy projects. Basically, my job in layman's terms is to help towns and schools run RFPs for solar projects and manage the process, you know, from start to finish. So we originally engaged with Tolland back in 2022, ran an RFP, selected a vendor, worked our way through agreements with the vendor, and we're ultimately hamstrung by the incentive program, the availability of the incentives for the projects at the time. The program in question is called the Non-Residential Renewable Energy Solutions, or the NRES program. You'll hear me refer to it as over time. Basically, the way that that program worked up until this year is that you know, there was a limited pool of funding, was made available twice a year, and projects had to bid into the program to basically like compete against each other for incentives. And what ended up happening is that the program is so popular that the values on the incentives, because of that bid process, got driven down and down and down and down until the projects really just didn't make any economic sense at that point. You know, really the main reason that folks embrace these projects, sustainability aside, of course, because that's obviously an important part of it, but the name of the game is really cost reduction. So the fact that we were having a difficult time competing for the incentives at a level that made the projects financially attractive, we hit the pause button. And what changed is that for 2025, the program now has a specific pool of funding specifically for public schools. So it's helped grow the program, make it more accessible. They've made the incentive first come, first serve, so we don't have to bid against everybody else in Connecticut that wants the same funding. And they set a standardized incentive amount at the maximum allowable under the program. So those dynamics definitely changed the game and brought the projects back around to where they were originally. And the numbers that were originally proposed are just far more attainable now than they were before. So when I reached out to Dr. Willett about 6 months ago, you know, suggested that we update the proposal from the vendor and take a fresh look now that we have a more clear path to get into the incentive program. So we refreshed the numbers, and I can walk everybody through the basics of how the proposals per school would function. You know, I'm not sure to what extent folks on the board have discussed the conversations that we had with the facilities committee, but there seemed to be a consensus from that process that some of the projects were more advantageous than others. So we can certainly talk about that and, you know, walk through. But before I proceed further, does anybody have any questions about anything that I've covered so far?
Nope, looks good, Ed.
Okay, all right, thanks. So this slide here, this is the pricing overview. And before I get into the particulars of what all of this means and how it's interpreted, the schools that we had looked at were the middle school, intermediate, Birch Grove, and the high school. The high school is a different setup than the other schools, and I'll walk through the two reasons why that's the case. But just starting with the three here first, these were proposed on a power purchase agreement basis, also another acronym, PPA. The premise behind the PPA is that the developer owns, operates, maintains the solar asset, and the school district agrees to buy the power, obviously be the host, to the project for a 20-year period, but then also agrees to buy the power at a fixed price per kilowatt hour over that 20-year term. So what I did here, just to try to streamline what these projects mean in terms of numbers, the first column here is a system size, so that's its maximum rated output in kilowatts DC. The number of kilowatt hours that would be produced by that system in the first year. The Eversource cost, so that's the cost that we're addressing directly on your Eversource bill. And then the solar cost per kilowatt hour, what you would pay the solar developer if you went this direction with power purchase agreements. And then you have an annual savings, which is just the price difference between these two. So your higher cost Eversource kilowatt hour minus your lower cost solar kilowatt hour, multiplied by how many kilowatt hours you produce in the year. And then from a lifetime savings perspective, what I do for those calculations is assume, a very moderate escalation factor with Eversource, 1.5% per year, which again, historically is been very conservative. And then, you lose 0.5% of the energy production per year from the system. So you have a little bit of a tapering over time on the kilowatt hours that you get. But the lifetime savings is basically a 20-year look from year 1 to year 20. So we did this for the three schools, the middle school, intermediate, and Birch Grove. And we can talk about the layouts and some of the particulars of each, but Birch Grove had the most advantageous PPA rate, so the cost per kilowatt hour. And that's really just a function of the fact that the building is brand new and is effectively solar ready. It was clearly built to be able to accept, a solar project on a low cost basis. The other two schools have very, very old electric infrastructure and would require more significant upgrades in order to be able to accept the power from the solar array. So those costs, the cost per kilowatt hour on both of those sites is higher. And then the savings on a net basis is highest at the middle school, but relative to the size of the project, it's pretty big. And I know that we'd had some discussions in the facility committee about, there just being a lot of panels on the roof and then some potential projects at that school down the road that might require moving some panels and things like that. So the resolution that I got from that committee meeting was Birch Grove of those three seemed to be the most appealing, roughly $20,000 a year in savings and a little bit north of $600,000 over time. As I mentioned at the top of the slide, the major outlier here relative to the other three is the high school. So the thinking behind the high school is different for two reasons. One, this would be a parking canopy system, so not mounted on the roof of the school. Reason for that is that the age of the roof just doesn't really square with the 20 years that we would need for a system like this. When the roof is either too old or too new, it doesn't really make for a good long-term play with a solar project. So parking canopy here, and also this would be designed more as just a system that's connected to the power grid and would be selling energy to Eversource for a period of 20 years, rather than a system that creates energy to offset your consumption. The reason for that being, this high school already has an agreement, a virtual net metering agreement with an array that's located in town that creates credits that are then applied to the high school's bill. So we don't want to mess with that. That's a good thing. It's working. It's doing what it's supposed to. It's saving the district money. Adding more benefit to that meter would not actually create a benefit for the school at this point. You're already maximizing, the value of solar credits from an offsite array. So the power would go back to Eversource. Under the program, how that works is the developer would enter into a 20-year agreement with the utility to sell power at a fixed cost. And effectively what they do is, for lack of a better way to put it, pay rent. So that's a fixed annual payment, irrespective of the energy production. So you don't have any production risk. It's really just, payment and consideration for allowing them to build, own, and operate that asset in the designated location. So it's interesting if you take this all together, and again, however the district would, which projects it would deem the most advantageous, obviously, not up to me, but what I really like actually about a mix of what's called behind the meter, so that's like the 3 schools where you're producing power, it's being utilized on site, combined also with a front of the meter project as part of the same portfolio, is that you basically have like a built-in hedge mechanism within what you're doing. Because if for some reason energy prices went down, right? I mean, it's not impossible, unlikely, I think, over 20 years based on what's happened over the last few years. But even if it were to come down a bit, that payment that you receive for allowing the developer to own the asset at the high school stays fixed no matter what. If energy prices increase, then that power purchase agreement that you have for the project on the roof or roofs becomes that much more valuable too over time. So it kind of has like a self-balancing, mechanism within, the portfolio, having behind the meter and in front of the meter as a mix. If you add all of the savings and the revenue together from the 4 projects, it's just a little bit north of $120,000 per year. Again, from the FCC meeting or the facility committee meeting, Birch Grove and the high school seem to be the most interesting. And I think, I don't want to put words in Pete Zaba's mouth, but I think those were the 2 that appealed to him the most. I heard him express that on more than one occasion. I'm not sure if he's on the call to vouch for that or not, but
Adam, we've got a question here, if you don't mind just jumping in right there.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, thanks for coming. I had a question. This will just, it looks like at least the intermediate middle school Birch Grove. The Eversource kilowatt per hour is 0.185. Like I know on like my home bill, I can, go out and shop around and I can get it for 8, 9, 10, 12, whatever it might be at that given time over, whether it's a 6 month, 12, 36 months, whatever you kind of lock that in. How is this Eversource kilowatt rate determined on your chart here?
yeah, so we actually, Tolland uses the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities energy program to purchase its energy supply, and which is also run through Titan. So while we have expertise in the renewable side, we also are very well versed in electricity supply contracts and that sort of thing. So what's interesting about your Eversource cost per kilowatt hour is your supply is just a piece of it. It's not the whole thing. So it's the single biggest charge that we can address. But when you then factor in the charges on the non-supply part of your bill that we can address, that's where we get 18.5 cents.
It's a fine.
Excuse me?
It's combined rate.
Oh, combined, okay, all right. All right, thank you at this time.
Bill?
You got a question for Pete? With the high school plan. If I'm correct, they're talking about putting canopies on the parking lot. Right. Are we gonna find a savings with snow removal or anything like that, or is it just not that significant?
Well, snow removal that would occur where the canopies are located is done by the town. Okay, so they'll use the loader that you see parked typically by the two-bay garage. So they essentially every year give Dr. Willett or the business manager an accounting of in-kind services, let's say, that are essentially free, but that they have to assign a rate to. So they would have a little less work in the back. It would not affect my custodial staff. You would have, obviously the vast majority of your students would be parking underneath it. So there's some pros and cons to that, obviously, with cars not getting as wet, not having to remove snow after you walk out from class, slips and falls in that area. It's not being weathered as much, sunlight, cars not heating up, in that way. So there are pros and cons to that. We have to watch certain things, like we have think about our football games, the Lions Club, might have to look strategically how they set up their tent. Would it be smart to cook underneath that per se? I mean, so there are some pros and cons to that. Over time, if the parking lot asphalt was replaced and restriped, it would last longer. It's not being beaten down by UV light. So it actually would extend the lifespan of the parking lot underneath it, to some extent. And it also doesn't really affect other structural parts of the school. And what Adam's referring to is we have a sizable roof project sitting in a future capital plan for 2 to 3 years from now. That doesn't make sense for us to throw solar on the roof and have to remove solar to new roof membrane up there. So the timing is just not great for exploring rooftop solar. And you do have 185,000 square feet of roof space up there. So it's an attractive scenario here, but I would say it would be post roof install or you time the project at the same time that you're gonna do. I hope that answered your question.
It does, and now that it prompted another question. I like just the initial idea of it here at the high school. It seems like a win-win for us. But I also think 2 to 3 years from now, when we get the roof redone, does it make sense to put more panels up?
Yeah.
And
So,
or
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if this is helpful or not, but because we're not going behind the meter and, like I said, because you already have that virtual net metering arrangement where the utility bill that's associated with the high school receives credits, doesn't receive energy, it receives the dollar amount equivalent of that energy production from an array elsewhere. What you could then do is just build a phase 2. So you could utilize the roof to do exactly what we're doing with the parking lot, but just expanded with that, on the roof instead.
That's essentially what I was gonna say, that Dan said. At some point, we'll have to look to what the town arrangement is with the South River array in town on when that could expire as well. I think there's a lifespan on that as well. I'm not sure what it is. I was not involved in that. But that could dictate some of the future decisions that we make once the roof is gonna be done here as well.
do we worry about us looking like a solar farm?
That was the age-old question too. I mean, when we first were thinking about this, and Adam's been laughing a little bit, but we had some ground solar on the side of the middle school. Where you have a big chunk of grass where the water meter is, close to the old Catapult Road there, because you have a ton of grass there, and but you would look like a solar farm, you know, obviously, your school would look like it's. And the other issue that we have is that we still have to make sure that our grid can support all the energy we're producing, you know, so, and there are, you know, I'm gonna say, it's not certainty that, you know, we throw enough solar out there that the grid could handle it without Eversource being forced to do an upgrade to the grid within this area, which they choose not to do, you know, so there may be limits to how much we can actually produce. You know?
So just one point to that, Pete. Eversource does maintain active hosting capacity maps that, you know, we're referencing when we basically, you know, we put a project like this together, and also we would have to complete an interconnection application with Eversource, and, you know, to go through that in a formal way. But as of now, there is hosting capacity locally on the three-phase lines to be able to support a project like this without significant upgrades.
I guess the question was, Adam, too, is that it supports the upgrades we're proposing now, but if we're adding another 100 and some 1,000 square feet of panels on the high school roof, do we know exactly at this point in time if it could support that? And I don't know, I can't answer that from my.
Well, I mean, grid planning, I mean, the map, the hosting capacity map is constantly changing, and the reality is that anybody with a project could jump in front of you and take whatever hosting capacity is there now. So, you know, it's a dynamic process where upgrades are occurring, projects are coming into the queue, taking that space, and or funding additional upgrades. So I think trying to plan 3 years out what the local grid hosting capacity is going to be is basically impossible.
Who maintains them if something happens to them?
The vendor. So complete funding, maintenance, insurance, all the costs associated with that equipment are all borne by the vendor.
No cost to the schools.
Correct.
One last question. I look at these annual savings based on the production of kilowatt hours that we can produce. It wasn't that long ago where we got a large thermal system sold to us with big promises of savings that never materialized. How confident are we in these numbers that these are the savings that we're obviously not dollar for dollar going to see, but you know, I see a savings at the middle school of $25,000. You know, if that year one comes in and we've only saved $5,000, you know, we might have, you know, some issues with that.
Sure.
There is.
Yeah. So this is a good instance of, you know, the classic, like, well, what can you control and what can you not control question, right? What we can control, the cost per kilowatt hour, which is set, that's fixed for 20 years. So that's an easy thing. In terms of the actual production from the system, there are performance guarantees in the agreement. So that's kind of the other variable, like the actual, like through the maintenance and operations of the system, like being able to guarantee that it'll produce a minimum number of kilowatt hours. And if it doesn't, that there's a true up mechanism in there for the school. The thing that we cannot control, which can work in your favor or potentially work against you for the power purchase agreement scenarios, not the front of the meter high school, but the instance where you're actually buying power, is the Eversource column. So if prices were to come way down, that would generally be a good thing, because obviously the majority of your power is still going to be bought the old-fashioned way. So I don't think you would necessarily, you know, be worse off if electricity rates fell. But anything that could close the gap here between Eversource cost and solar cost is a risk for solar project. I think also when I look at these PPA numbers, the ones with the biggest spread would be Birch Grove. Fewest number of panels, biggest spread between Eversource cost and solar. While the savings might be, nominally less than the middle school, just as a for instance, you can get there a lot more safely, if you will, with more room for error. With the high school projects, there's zero production risk for the school district for Tolland in that case. Even if the array, obviously using an extreme example, if it never produced a single kilowatt hour, that's not the school's problem. Green Skies, the vendor, is still obligated to pay that fixed amount for 20 years. So it kind of comes back to that comment I made before about how there's like some built-in hedges here, where you do have protections against, things that might happen that could potentially compromise, what your anticipated savings are. And, I've been a part of a number of conversations that have to do with geothermal systems, if that's what you're referring to. And, geothermal and solar, generally speaking, like very, very different. Geothermal is incredibly complex. And there are a number of things that can swing a project kind of into the gutter, out of the gutter with a geothermal project. For solar, which I think is generally a good thing, is it's a very, very simple technology. The operations and maintenance is very straightforward. The major variance that you get in any given year is just going to be, hey, we had a particularly sunny, warm, clear sky summer, or like we had a summer a few years ago where it just rained, for like 6 weeks straight. So weather's the other variable that you just can't control, but that's why I like the front of the meter setup so much.
Pete, I think you had some.
Yeah, I just want to say, Adam hit the nail on the head. I mean, the geothermal project, I'm gonna say I inherited that project. I was not part of that in the development stage. But the truth be told, you were generating somewhere between 84 and 86% of your guaranteed savings. That's still a good project, because guess what? You're saving about 1 million kilowatt hours a year just by going geothermal. Okay, so you consume about 3.4 million kilowatt hours a year. You were consuming somewhere between 4.2 and 4.5 before you went geo. Okay, so you're still, just imagine how much your power bills will be now if you had not gone geothermal. So even though you weren't getting your guaranteed savings, and there's a variety of reasons why. And by the way, we have eventually achieved our savings under that total project by when I did the additional retrofits of the LED lighting in all the schools, because we were saving about 20% on electrical and which actually made up the difference, but it was outside of Honeywell's scope. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to buy out the contract, because they were of no value to us. They weren't willing to invest their own money. But with that said, Adam's correct. This is a lot more straightforward. There's a lot less moving parts with this. Things that affect our performance contract with Honeywell had to do with COVID. Building use, how much fresh air we were bringing in. What's the standards? Do we keep our AC at 76, which they wanted? It's a little warm. I'm just being honest, okay? I don't know what you guys keep your own house at in summertime. But so we did things that were, outside of that, that would increase the variability of your guaranteed savings. This is a lot more straightforward, with really just weather being the biggest one.
The low hanging fruit here are the high school for the cantilevers and Birch Grove, because of the age of the roof.
Right, it's the best return.
If we did those alone, we'd have at least a little bit, like 62 or something like that.
I think you're at about 95,000 a year with those 85, 90. Right, Adam? I can't see your screen from here where I'm sitting.
80,000.
Yeah, but between the two, 82.
Which is worth, I mean, it's a good chunk.
Yeah.
It'd be worth doing.
Really good. Rena, you had your hand up.
I think Bill covered them, but I just want to clarify two things. One is, so a student, comes in hot, it hits the pole that the thing is on and it falls down. We don't pay anything, but I would assume there would be some potential loss of, solar generation for some period of time.
So these are steel beams with concrete footing. There is, never say never with a young driver, I suppose, but
Be driving his probably. That Stafford has these. If you go to
I
the back,
just wanted to.
they're really big.
I also just wanted to really be sure. So in this grid, it says, Eversource is at this number and our cost would be, set at the 14.6, blah, blah, blah. If Eversource literally came down to like 10 cents, let's just say, there is never in 20 years going to be any opportunity to change what we would receive if we sign this contract. 10 years from now, it's really wicked less expensive with Eversource because they've done something. I don't know what that would be. But would there ever be an opportunity to revisit those numbers if there was a significant change in the cost of energy?
So the answer to that would be no. But again, I mean, that could cut the other way too. Like if Eversource costs went up significantly, you wouldn't want the solar developer to be able to knock on your door and tell you that you got to pay more now either, right? I mean, there's definitely a little bit of risk management here again, which is why with the front of the meter carport, that's set in stone. Energy prices could go north, south, east, west, doesn't matter. The array could produce 100% of its predicted output or 0%. Doesn't matter. School gets paid either way. The other thing I would just, because like I try to come at these things from like, my job as an energy consultant generally is like, okay, how do I help you guys make sense of the pieces of the puzzle that you've put together here, which ultimately create your bottom line cost? And there's a few different things that go into that, right? There's the energy supply contracts that you enter into every couple of years. Again, we've worked with the school district to manage those through the CCM program. That's all of your kilowatt hours. You peg a price to all of those kilowatt hours every couple of years. We try to, make sure that the market's low when we make our recommendation, but it's a way to help control costs. The other thing that you guys have done wonderfully is, on an efficiency basis, and everything I've ever seen of what Pete's done has been incredibly thorough to reduce your overall consumption, because the best kilowatt hour is the kilowatt hour that you don't need. And then you start to factor in projects like this where you're creating some of your own power, certainly not all. It's not an all-in venture. Just like for some context, the amount of kilowatt hour production from Birch Grove, just using that, let's say the one behind the meter project, if you guys decide to do it, that number of kilowatt hours is relative to all of your buildings. That is, I believe, 15% or so of everything. So even if Eversource costs tanked like significantly, you guys would be way better off in that scenario, like regardless of whatever was going on with solar, and your exposure to that with your PPA rate would be, relative to your whole portfolio, pretty small. So again, these are just pieces that you want to put together to manage your energy spend wisely. None of them taken separately are going to make or break you, but when they're together and they're holistic and they're functioning, as a well thought out energy management plan, that's really why you do them.
Go on, Brian.
Yeah, just in regards to, it's maybe a Walt question, but in regards to this high school project with having the carport out there, considering that the town more or less owns the buildings and the land and whatnot, this production of this electricity, were these payments be made to the town, or are we gonna be receiving any of these funds?
Well, this would benefit us.
Are we, how sure are we on that?
I mean, I'm 99%, 95% sure.
95.
Something gets pulled. It would have to be something that got pulled on us, that was a switcho changeo. But it would be in our domain. It would apply to our accounts. People can fight over it, but the likelihood they would, I doubt that they would fight us on that.
It's just something I think we need to.
I mean, they could do the same thing in the library parking lot anytime. I mean,
What's that?
Yeah, I don't think it would benefit the town as much as it would benefit us, obviously, because we consume 95% of all the power in town. So you're not gonna wanna take a $62,000 payment and apply it to the dog pound. I mean, it's.
They'll likely not give us trouble over this.
I don't know,
Now,
but I'm
they
saying-
could say, we'll reduce your budget accordingly.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
There's all kinds of things that could
Yeah.
happen from this, but,
Yeah.
but they typically have played well in the sandbox with us on stuff like this.
Yeah,
Cause it's gonna help us both out too, because obviously we have combined overall budget.
I almost somehow wish that it wouldn't be a payment to us at the high school, because that looks like revenue coming in
Yes, absolutely.
that the town could capture, as opposed to our utility bills being less.
Well, the other thing I could look into for you guys, just double check and see if there is a way that we could distribute that payment directly to the Eversource bill, if that's your preference, doing it that way.
Yeah.
You know, I can just double check and make sure. I'd have to just go through again really quickly, just a look through the Eversource bills and seeing, you know, net of what's being covered by your virtual net metering agreement, if we could distribute these credits across those. But I can relatively easily do that. I just have to go through your Eversource bills.
And let's look into that and let.
Dr. Willie, what's your thought on that, with a payment coming into us, that the town wouldn't say, hey, we're gonna capture that, as opposed to credits?
My impression, having talked to the town about this, is that either way, they would let it, they would work with us. And I don't think 62 is enough to, you know,
For them to move on.
yeah.
All right, Adam, we kind of jumped in the middle of your presentation. You want to keep going?
No, sure. I mean, this is like really the meat and potatoes of the slide, I mean, of the whole deck. I mean, the other stuff we have here are just layouts. And, you know, again, this is some of what we talked about before at the facility committee meeting, where a lot of panels on the roof at the middle school. There's, you know, some potential to be doing work with air handling equipment on the roofs and things like that. So, you know, again, I completely understand where the bang for the buck relative to how many panels here is not, you know, thrilling to folks. I would understand, but this is a layout of the middle school roof.
Just a quick question, and Pete, if I remember the last time when we had this discussion, it's been a number of years, and there was angst about using that grass field. So this current plan or proposal here leaves the grass to its current state.
That is correct. I mean, this is a proposed behind the meter project. We would consume a lot of the power that is there. You can see a lot of our roofs are covered. There's two issues that I foresee. One is potential rooftop units at your CAF and gym, which are a future project for improving indoor air quality in those two spaces that don't have cooling. And the other problem is, I think in fiscal year 2029 would be the roof project that would be above your auditorium, because that roof will be at 21 years at that point in time. Last time that was done was 2008 through the state of Connecticut. And that's a portion of that percentage too. So, you know, you've got some variables with that. And this school was the least attractive return as far as their kilowatt hours, I believe. So, as far as our PPA number. So it's a lot of panels for minimal payback, you know, so.
All right, Adam?
Sure. And then the intermediate school. Again, fairly simple layout here. Everything's on the roof.
All the same age at that school. It was done in 2017. That was the nice part about that project is the roof was all the same age, so I was able to do that entire roof. While because the middle school had the 1983 addition that didn't match any of the other roofs. Believe it or not, that roofing project that I did actually combined 4 different ages of roofs. My predecessor was doing little pieces, which you don't get an economy of scale and other things with that. So now at least we're down to a school with 2 different ages of roofs now instead of like 6. There at the middle school. But TIS, the only variable there would be rooftop units above the gym to, give that space.
That's the capital project.
That's the gym, actually. The CAF is geo. So the APR, which is the CAF on the second floor is a geothermal space.
Okay, Adam?
Yep. And then Birch Grove. Clearly, I mean, you can see, from a square footage perspective, the building is super efficient. You've got ample real estate on that roof. It's the newest building. It's the newest roof of the bunch. The electric room was designed, with solar in mind. So it's basically plug and play, hence why the PPA rate's the lowest. It's nice and flat. Everything's uniform. Definitely the ideal candidate for a rooftop project of the 3 schools.
Okay.
And then the parking canopy for the high school, and you gotta forgive me here a little bit. I mean, for whatever reason, the satellite imagery for this location sort of warps this to make it look like it's like a mountain face or something. I don't know why. So this image here is a little bit warped. But the idea would be, on the side of the building, in between, the high school itself and the football field.
How tall are these solar panels or posts up off of the ground?
Yeah, so the minimum height clearance on these is 14 feet.
All right, I saw that close to the football field, things happen. So it's just,
But they could be installed higher. So
Yeah.
If there's certain features with them, if we're gonna fit that loader under there, if they're gonna get a fire truck underneath there.
gotcha.
We would have to just let the developer know what kind of requirements that we had with that.
Might help to have an articulating lift.
Sure, and then just this is a generalized next step. This is not anything set in stone. We've just been kind of I think from my perspective, I put something down so you can kind of see like a general start to finish. But the long story short with the timeline is the idea is that these would be a summer 2026 project. The steps that we would have to take first, really to kind of get the process moving in earnest, is finalizing the agreements with the solar company, Green Skies, and then that allows them to then enter into the NRES program to secure the incentives for the projects. Once they do that, then they can start taking all the necessary steps, spending serious development dollars on engineering, procurement, construction, etc., getting those activities teed up for when the kids are out of school, summer 2026. So, I'm not trying to shoehorn this project into the summer at this point. That would be effectively impossible. And we know that, most school districts are not wild about these sorts of construction projects happening during the year. So it's the expectation was set right out of the gate that these would be 16 months or so from now for actual construction.
Okay, Dr. Willett, so what does the commitment schedule look like? If I'm looking at this, the board would have to say that they were interested in what, by what?
Well,
Yeah, so there's no, oh, sorry, I don't want
go ahead.
Either
to,
one.
okay. Yeah, so the incentive program is really, that's the main like gating issue to have a live project, like getting through that step. And in order to do that, we need, finalized agreements with the solar developer. It's part of the requirements when you apply into the program. There has to be an actual agreement in place between solar company and the site owner. So, whatever process that the board wants to take or feels comfortable with, to get that done. So if it's the power purchase agreement, working with legal, which we did a couple of years ago. Obviously, it's not like we can just take all of the work we did a couple of years ago and apply it today. There would have to be some tinkering, of course, but we made a lot of progress with those documents a few years ago. So revitalizing those, bringing them up to, sort of current details with the projects, and then having those executed, then frees up the rest of this process to really happen. The commitment point for the district would be, so signing those definitive agreements with Green Skies is what sets you on the track to like a firm commitment on the project. The caveat to that being, so for the carports, this has to go in front of planning and zoning, so the town's planning and zoning. If for some reason they kill the project, which I've never had a project, especially a municipal project, but any projects die in planning and zoning. But let's say, for instance, worst case scenario, planning and zoning denies the project, then basically the contract just dissolves and, we all kind of go our separate ways. But barring anything like that, signing that agreement puts you on the path to these projects getting built. So I would say by the time you sign those documents, the power purchase agreement, that's when you'd want to feel comfortable that yes, you're moving forward, unless something unforeseen happens.
Adam, I just want to confirm, there's no cost associated to the school. We don't have to pay anything for this.
Absolutely. So Green Skies covers all of the costs. It's simply, you're either buying the power if it's a rooftop project, or you're receiving the rent payment for the front of the meter. Or, like I said, I'm going to look into seeing if we can convert it to a utility bill credit structure instead. The only cost that the district would have, it just, if you want to hire outside legal counsel as the district did before, presuming you're still working with the same attorney who I've worked with on other engagements like this, you'd have some billable hours there. But that's it.
Jaden, if you're on, I've got a question for you as the young guy of the group that's involved in the football program and knowing that our state winning soccer team plays there. Do you see any downside for having these panels at the high school?
Not if if it doesn't intrude on people's ability to attend the games and participate in any public event at the school. No, I don't see a downside there. That's as much of an opinion as I've got, to be honest with you. I don't, pretty straightforward answer. No.
Okay.
I just have one last thing. The Green Skies that you're referencing, how long have you been working with them, and what's the reliability or reputation, or what's your thoughts on them?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in this business now for almost 15 years with Titan, doing work like this, and running RFPs really for municipalities. And Green Skies, I think over time, I feel comfortable saying they probably won about 30% of those RFPs, maybe a little more, a little less, kind of, hard to keep track, but they have just as good a chance as anybody, of winning an RFP, if not better. They're located in North Haven, so they're a Connecticut-based company. They've been in business since 2008. They're on top of, I kind of lost count of how many school districts they've worked with here in Connecticut over time. I know how many they've worked with for me. Maybe that extrapolates out to, other folks that they've worked with as well too. But I hold them in very high regard. They do good work. Connecticut-based company, and from a pricing perspective, they're always, kind of right at the top. So I think, you'd be well served working with them.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So help me understand the schedule that you have here. I mean, because, basically.
And this is a loose schedule too. It's not, it's just sort of there as like, okay, just sort of helping give a frame of reference.
Okay, so the no later than is not actually.
I know, yeah, yeah. I could word that better.
Okay, all right, so because that's where, even assuming that the board knew all about this and was just overly enthusiastic, there's no way an April 1 date would happen for.
No, I know, yeah. I mean, the power purchase agreement and getting through that is, that could take a couple of weeks easily. So I think I put this together for Walt maybe back in January or so. These are all like kind of moving targets, but just, had we started this, process a little bit earlier in the year, probably, would have been more realistic. But I would say, taking a couple of weeks with, your legal counsel, getting through the documents and just buttoning those up to a place where, they're customer friendly and in a place that you feel comfortable with. And, whenever that happens, that's when we can then apply into the program and start doing, all the work necessary to get these things built eventually.
And FFC looked at this first, so these are probably what they saw, but we've been through some of this paperwork before, so we wouldn't, as Adam said, these are not hard timelines, but we have some familiarity with what would have to happen here. So, we'll be able to move it along. The board would probably want to look at, if you're chewing on this, probably wanted to come back for the second consideration, something like April 9th, I'd imagine. And so that's, Adam, that's probably the next stop on the train here.
Sure.
Percolating on this, kind of considering it, and then bringing it back to the table on April 9th to discuss a second time. Or
Yeah. Yeah, no need to get hung up on this. I mean, the important part really, like the point to drive home is that it would be summer 26 for construction.
Completely understand, the program manager sees dates and starts sweating. Yeah, so.
100%. Yeah. We don't.
Move on.
Let's get that slide out of there.
Brian, did you have something to say?
No, I was just saying, like, if we just make a decision till July 1st, if we could still do this to summer of 2026 is still a possibility, right?
So the only thing that again, coming back to this idea of what can I control and what I can't control. So, submitting into the NRES program, the program, the way it's structured now is it opens up once a year. It opened up in February, and they allow 20 megawatts of projects in per year until they close it down. So these projects, just for reference, about 1.5 megawatts of that. So that's really the thing where if the program fills up for the year, then we just have to wait for the next cycle in February. It's not to say that we can't, take steps in the meantime to be able to, get this to a 2026 build, but getting that incentive locked in sooner rather than later is just, it's a good thing. It takes some of the uncertainty out of the project. So I always say that the timeline is completely up to you guys. I just want to give you some of the benchmarks and stuff that we, think about in terms of like incentives and construction and stuff like that, and how we work with you to achieve it like a mutual goal.
Thank you. That's my last question.
All right, Adam, anything else you'd like to present?
That's it for me.
And Pete's
I
good.
just want to ask a question just to piggyback on the waiting game. So if the allocation is used up for this year and we have to look at the NRES program for entering next year in 2026, the PPA numbers would not be exactly the same, correct? They're gonna change, correct?
Well, so the NRES program does reserve the ability to adjust the incentive rates per year based on the prevailing value of energy for that year. So, and that's a calculation that Eversource has, which, can either work in your favor or work against you. So it would probably not be a dramatic swing. Yeah, but just if we're talking about stuff that like keeps me up at night or sort of feels a little unpredictable, is just, a lot of the steel from this project is probably going to come from Canada, right? And we're kind of living in a little bit of a different environment now, tariffs and stuff like that. So being able to lock in your project costs sooner rather than later is probably a good thing. But I don't have a crystal ball that, so I can't say exactly what's, the next year has in store. But based on, current project costs, known incentive values, that's what's reflected here. If we do have to reprice the project a year from today, I don't want to necessarily put myself on on the hook here to promise that it'll be exactly the same. I don't know. But obviously we try to hold the line, right? I mean,
I just wanted you guys as a committee to know that those numbers are not necessarily going to be the same.
Yeah, if we don't get it.
All right, Dana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you can.
Good evening. And man, Pete, I apologize. I said the next Pete Saba meeting, I was going to be in person. I do apologize. I was in Western Mass today. I have a question for the team and Tony and Dr. Willett. Is this, we've seen this solar presentation multiple occasions with multiple variations of the board. With this current board, this came to the FFC and now to this meeting, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, because I'm just trying to think about, so can we put this forth as discussion and possible move to action on our next meeting? Or do we feel that another review of this is important? I think obviously in light of what Adam kind of just reviewed with some different answers to our questions, I think it might behoove us to take the steps to get this in motion if that's what we in fact choose to do. So I just want to make sure, again, I've seen it on multiple occasions, but I don't know how many times this board as a whole group has. So I don't want to push it without people feeling comfortable. But I definitely.
There are obviously, there are members of this board that haven't necessarily seen this presentation before, just as there are some that have seen it a couple of times with some iterations, some changes there. What I'm thinking, and I'm obviously open to comment or advice. What I'm thinking is that we'll put this on the agenda, not for the next meeting, but possibly the meeting after that. And we can put it in for discussion and approval, maybe the wrong word, but recommendation to move forward at that point. But we can certainly on that agenda be able to make some sort of movement.
So you're not prepared to put it into action tonight?
No.
Perfect, Tony. Thank you. That's what I was asking. Again, I wanted to make sure that everybody had enough chance to see it, review it, and be able to speak intelligently when we do go to action. And again, as I said, you and I have been the lucky ones and a few others to see this presentation. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great opportunity for Tolland Public Schools. So I just want to make sure that we're taking that we're taking action at the appropriate time that supports the board. So thank you.
And Bill, just to kind of add into why I said no. Based on the last time we looked at this and here, there is risk. I'm not saying it's significant or insignificant, but there is a risk in, prices and the returns and the savings that I just want to make sure that the board members have a chance to think about and then accept that. I don't want it to be, this is the first time you've seen this, and you have to make a decision, move forward based on that. So I want to give it time and do that second read.
Coming from, and this would be a question for Dana, Jaden, anyone who's seen these presentations before, what are the things that have prevented you from moving forward in the past when you've gotten these?
So and I'll start out, the last time I recall when we went through this, it got hung up and it, Adam kind of tapped on a couple of those, and Pete, there were some concerns with the grass. One of the iterations of this took that middle school field and essentially made it, the solar farm. And there was real pushback against that. There was conversation about, I think, Rini, you asked the question earlier just a little bit ago, about if the energy crisis did some mysterious downward spike, the renegotiation. There was still a bit of heartache on, what had happened with the geothermal and a reluctance to enter into a 20-year conversation. And a couple others that I'm not recalling at the time. And I want to just get out front and say that I'm not saying here that I think those apply here, or that I think that should sway the decision. But because there were those concerns, I want to make sure that each person has a chance to look at this, to think, and then to come back with additional questions for either Pete or Adam, and make sure that you're comfortable.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything about pushing this 2 weeks. I'm just wondering what were some of the things that you guys didn't, what were some of the reasons why you didn't jump into contract or, see the savings in.
And mine was that 20-year commitment. We've lived through the geothermal here. In my previous life, we did a similar type deal with Honeywell and those kind of things. And while there are certainly gains and opportunities, I've seen the other side of it, and just a little bit hesitant. The numbers look great. The numbers look enticing, and I think it's certainly something that needs to be considered.
So there was a conflation a little bit with the ESCO project at Honeywell, which is a totally different animal than this. This is not ESCO, and so there was a tainting from the Honeywell project towards that, as well as being on the grass and the fear of the 20 years and how the rates could change. But when we were looking at this, the cantilever at the high school and the Birch Grove, they're pretty safe bets. So it'll take we should take the weeks to look at it, and you guys should carefully look at it. But those two schools doing that it's only, only 82 to 84, but it's 82 to 84. And I think it could help us over a period of that time. That's quite a bit of money.
Other thing I'd like to just say too is, because I was involved in a lot of those discussions through the FFC and so on. And the other thing that people don't realize, that a lot of the decisions we made internally when COVID first hit, we went out, we renegotiated all of our contracts when COVID first hit. And I was one of the first guys to call up, Titan, I got to go out the bid on everything like right now. And I called Lisa from the town. I said, you got to jump on me on this. And we got a minuscule supply rate for the longest term that we could. We got a very low oil rate for a year. That's longest that they were willing to go out for us, because you have to buy oil ahead of time and your supplier actually has to store it. You know what I mean? So it's not, there's roadblocks to that. So, but we renegotiated everything. And so we were insulated from the market for a while until now, right? And Eversource just had the biggest rate increase they've ever had in a single year, okay? And I had to go up in electrical, I think somewhere, I don't know, 160,000 or something like that, just on electrical, while most of my other accounts were stable. And we're coming to a point where we can't insulate ourselves anymore with that. besides doing stuff like this, you know what I mean? So, and I think that was what some people saw, is that we were still paying less than our competitors for a while we're talking about solar, you know what I mean? So, but now it's becoming more of a necessity to almost provide insurance on our energy costs, right? You know, like,
Dana, did that? We get your answer?
Me?
Yeah, I thought we cut you off.
Yeah, it was an open question. to
No, yeah. And everybody pretty much answered. I think there was some more questions about the cantilevers at the high school. The TMS grass was a big area of conversation, and the roof, different things like that. So, and then obviously, you know, what Tony and Dr. Willett and then what Pete just described were obviously areas of conversation through the process. I've been for moving this through. I think it's a win for our Tolland Public Schools in the long run. But there was some things that kind of hung us up. But I think that where we are with the research that's been done and the amount of time and but that's been put into this to thoroughly go through it, I definitely think that this might be our opportunity to take steps forward as needed.
Yeah. My only closing thought, and I'll get out of everybody's hair because I know you probably got a lot more to go through on the agenda. In taking a fresh look at this, knowing like kind of where we've been before, and you know, bringing something else, something kind of new, if you will, to the table now, is taking this again, just as Birch Grove and the high school. If you just, you know, focus on those two only, and intermediate and middle school, it kind of strip out. You know, 75% of the value in these projects here now comes in the form of guaranteed income. So I think we've de-risked the project significantly from that perspective. And then the other 25% comes from, you know, a behind the meter system at Birch Grove, which represents only about 15% of your global kind of energy consumption anyway. So we're just taking a piece, you know, trying to make it a meaningful piece, but this isn't an all-in bet on solar. It's not an all-in, you know, locked in for 20 years. You still have plenty of opportunity to ride the market with your third-party supply contracts. Hopefully, as technology increases, you'll be able to become even more efficient. So again, this is just a piece trying to help you guys put a well-rounded energy management plan into action, and this being a part of it, not, you know, an end in and of itself necessarily. So that's kind of my closing thought on the subject. If anybody else has any more questions, happy to answer them.
Any other questions?
Questions, but Adam, thank you or Mr. Teff, thank you for your presentation.
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate everybody taking the time to listen, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Adam. You have a great evening.
Okay, thanks. You guys too.
All right, Dr. Willett. Item L2, healthy food certification. Tell me I can't sell candy bars.
It's same thing that you get every single year on this. So the healthy food cert, basically the very, very short version is we don't pass it, we don't get the break from the federal government on the food.
I'm sorry, what does that, I couldn't hear you.
So every year we do the healthy food certification, and basically we commit to what they want us to commit to with respect to you can't sell food. Yeah, thank you, Pete. You can't sell, you know, food during the school day, et cetera. It has to follow a certain standard of health and nutrition. If we follow that and we commit to that, and the board has to commit to it through its motion, and the acceptance and passage of the Healthy Foods Initiative, then we get a break on the lunches. We get money back for each lunch. So we get reimbursed money if we say we're going to do this. So every year we do this. That's the short version. The motion itself is a mouthful, if you recall. So generally, sometimes you'll do 2 reads, sometimes you just go with it. I put the motions here.
It looks like there's 2 considerations, correct?
Yeah, but the motion is to allow the superintendent to support and authorize the 25-26 health foods initiatives and allow for the exemption of food and beverage items as well as other provisions as indicated in consideration 1 and consideration 2.
So this, there are two there, Brian. It's the first one moves it down to action. Then once we get to action, the second motion.
And basically, you have to do all of this. The district has to commit to all of this, which is generally what it happens, and then we get 10 cents back for lunch, and that adds up, you know, put the figure in here. We were reimbursed almost 20,000, you know, and it's always for the prior year.
That's all on 10 cents per lunch reimbursement.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quickly that adds up.
Discussion. Any questions?
Apologize, I don't hear this,
Yeah. Sorry, Brian.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm just kind of mumbling to myself. I apologize. I didn't really review these considerations prior to just this moment, so I apologize. Go ahead, Jay.
Go ahead, Jaden, what's your?
No problem. I just had a quick comment. You know, the 20,000. This is like Dr. Will mentioned. This is, you know, a yearly. You know, this is brought up frequently, and the first thought that comes to my head is I don't think we're going to sell $20,000 worth of concessions in the school store or, you know, anything like that. And so, you know, this is something that seems routine at this point. Makes sense for the district. We get money back, goes toward the district. So that's all. That's my input.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion to move this to board action.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
discussion. All right, Greenie,
Aye.
Bill,
aye.
aye, Brian,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Jaden,
Aye.
Dana.
Aye.
All right, Dr. Willett, let us move that into item N1. All right. Moving on, item L3, which is a discussion on the budget. Specifically, Brian, you had some ideas with the bus contract.
Yeah, so I just, I had emailed into leadership, many weeks ago. And it was going to be reviewed or whatnot. So I had an idea. I know we're getting pretty tough with the town manager. Really giving an increase of 2.99, and we had to essentially find some savings around $2 million. So I had an idea regarding some big ticket savings, and one of them was to join the middle school and high school bus routes, similar to the bus routes of Birch Grove and excuse me, Birch Grove and the intermediate school, to hopefully provide some sort of substantial savings with the busing for the school district. So I just wanted to kind of bring that forward. That's why if you go to the dashboard, Walt had emailed out the bus contract sometime this afternoon to everyone. So, and I know there was such a, I just wanted to see if that could be, just make sure that's one of the lists of items that we have, like a number with that idea for next week's more in-depth budget meeting. But I personally like that kind of number based and gone through and presented as one of the items on the list.
We'll completely understand. And in fact, yep, Jaden, I'll get to you in just a second. So yeah, in fact, when we were looking at next week's agenda, again, from the very high level, trying to figure out, okay, we're gonna have this agenda based entirely around the budget and possible reductions necessary to get to the 2 million. There are, I know you had the bus idea. There was an idea about the possible facility usages that we could use. Dr. Willett is digging into hopefully other ideas that we can do to try to reach that number with minimal long-term effects. So my hope, and then I'll turn to Dr. Willett and let you speak on it, is that as we talked at the beginning, what he'll bring next week get to us earlier Monday, and then be able to really get into meat and potatoes next week. Are items just like that we could get into. Is this possible? Yes or no? If it's not, what is possible within those realms? Why isn't it possible? What kind of savings would that bring to us to be able to put together that portfolio of what's going to be necessary? But the bus ideas you brought in was certainly.
Is there I guess, I'm not too sure, I don't have the timeline in head, so I know next week we're gonna have a big budget discussion. But I don't know if, I'm sure myself, along with other people, other board members have ideas running through their heads to where they like to alter this, change that, up the fee on this, ask a question about, can we raise the lunches or whatever the case to generate more revenue or clubs or, you know, what is the timeline for, if I have 5 other ideas, when am I presenting them to hopefully move that forward into our budget cuts or raise revenue, or how does that operation work moving forward?
So there's a couple things that I want to point in response to that question. In fact, Jen called me earlier today and she's like, "Well, we're talking about the budget next week." She's on. Oh, okay,
That's great.
When the council, by the point we start talking about it next week, the council won't have made their decision as to what that number is. So the 2.99 that's currently a part of the town manager's proposal is not necessarily what's going to end up getting flowed out to referendum or get flowed back to us. We recognize. What we're trying to do here is get in front of the ball there and say, okay, what's it going to take to get to the 2.99, where we can start figuring out, we can start asking questions. There's no commitment at that point because there's no number. So if after next week, you know, you go to bed and you have an epiphany the next morning, hey, if we do this, we could save some more money. That's still not only welcome, but that's encouraged. Because what we're going to see as, you know, Dr. Willett has his meeting with the council starts doing their deliberations. We're going to have further discussions as a board. When the council then votes and approves a number that'll come back to us even before referendum, we're going to have a discussion on as a board to say, how do we get from our 2.99 up or down to whatever that number is. And then when the referendum passes, we're going to have another conversation and really cement things down. So this is just trying to get some of the heavy lifting and figure out how we start to get there now, so that we can then kind of ride the wave and figure things out.
I just want to make sure, I think everyone here, and I'm sure everyone who hasn't spoken, has some great ideas in stuff, and I just don't want anybody's idea to be either pushed to the side or say, hey, we've only got 10 days to figure this out and we don't have the data, and Walt's trying to hunt down 18 different ideas that people have. I don't want that to happen, because I feel that kind of, we were in a little bit of a jam last budget, and I think some things got kind of pushed through at the end.
And that's why we're starting. It's also I think it's value added for the council, for the town, for all the decision makers that are involved in the process, to hear our discussions on what this means, so that they can then but they can then include the effects into their conversations. So this is just part of the process.
Yeah.
It is in no way, and just to be clear, to make sure we all understand, next week's meeting is in no way cementing anything down. It's just trying to get that understanding in that conversation going.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Who was somebody? Was it Jaden? I thought I saw somebody's hand up.
Yeah, I did, but it's okay. There's a lot there. Yeah. I guess it's more so suited for next week's discussion, so I won't touch on it too much tonight. But you know, happy to consider all options on the table.
And I would just stress, you know, while Dr. Willett is certainly going to be doing, you know, everything he can to brainstorm and gather information and provide the conversation for next week. If you have ideas, don't wait till next Wednesday. Get them to him now.
Send you an email tomorrow.
Yeah, so that he can include them on his list. He can start digging through, he can start doing the due diligence instead of, you know, he may not, put words in your mouth, but you may not have all of the answers on Monday or Wednesday, but certainly you can then prioritize and start going low hanging fruit, the big numbers. We can start doing the things to try to identify, biggest gain with least impact to the students. So, yeah, don't wait. Get them to them. Email, call, text, letter, whatever it takes.
This is more of a direct communication, not putting it on the budget Q&A thing or something like that. This is just like send in
Yeah,
direct.
yeah. If you have ideas on this, send them. It doesn't have to be on the
CC Jen,
Columbo,
CC Jen, she'll help gather them.
but yeah, we don't need to put them on the Q&A for this. We'll get them to him. Dr. Willett, when he starts gathering the information and pulling it together in whatever document form, we'll post that for the board to see and spit that out. But at this point, I don't see the need to funnel through the Q&A.
The sooner the better on that. Because if everybody's hitting me with like 5 or something,
No, how do you
Get
get
into that, having them
weeks and
soon.
weeks
Oh.
and weeks ago? Sorry.
I'm sorry if I didn't get back. I thought I texted you.
Yeah,
Other comments?
Jen's raised her hand.
Ms. Callahan?
Hey guys, sorry to join late. I did the TC meeting before ours. I just wanted to clarify. So any emails with ideas should go to Tony and myself and Walt, correct, Tony?
Yeah, CC me if you don't mind, but yeah, me and Jen, but send them to Walt and CC the two of us.
So it's going to Walt and Jen Palumbo and Tony and Jen Gallagher. Just make sure it's got Jen Palumbo in there.
I'm the hell bored.
Yeah.
Everybody can see.
But we can't apply all to those.
Good point, Jen.
Thanks.
Okay. You good?
Yeah, just so BQ 62 talks a little bit about this and then
Is that the best?
yeah.
Okay, let's hold that for that.
Sure.
But I just want to make sure we've got something in there. You can take a look if that, we're gonna talk about it, but if you want to add something.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Moving on to item N1 then. And Dr. Willett, if you would be so kind as to pull up the motion. Anybody that is properly hard driven and just would entertain the motion.
Motion to allow the superintendent to support and authorize the 2025-2026 healthy food certification and to allow for the exemption of food and beverage items as well as other provisions as indicated in considerations 1 and 2.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thought you were gonna make me read.
I was waiting if you wanted to.
No.
Rennie's second?
Yeah.
Discussion. Okay. Rennie,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
I'm an aye, Brian,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Jaden.
Aye.
Dana,
Aye.
Jen.
Hi.
All right, motion passes down with the candy bars, Dr. Willett.
That.
All right. Public participation, 2 minutes, comments limited to items on the agenda. As always, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and be recognized. If you're in the room, raise your hand and we will call upon you. Ask again, if you would like to speak, raise your Zoom hand. All right. Public participation closed. Points of information. Would anybody from the board like to speak? Right, Dr. Willett, as far as the future, I believe we have an instructional rounds.
Yep, that's tomorrow. Actually, it's 8:45 to 11:15, so slightly different than what's here, but yep, tomorrow at Tolland. So Unified Arts Intervention.
Beautiful. If you are able, I highly recommend, look forward to the conversation. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Rini,
Fine.
sorry, discussion. Okay, Rini,
Oh, aye, yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Aye, Brian,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Jaden. Dana,
Aye.
Jen,
Hi.
thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe.